Or
I can too. It's telling me my mic's been disabled, but that's all good.
we can hear you all right. Do
Let's
you want to
see
kick us
where.
off?
Can you see my camera now?
Yep.
Oh, cool. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'll just do acknowledgement of country. So PSO and the technical advisory groups acknowledge the traditional custodians of the countries throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today, and myself coming from Larrakia country. And then I'm going to move through to the agenda for today. So, Brett, I'm just not seeing any screen. I'm not sure if that's me or everyone. I'm not seeing any presentation or anything.
Okay. Everyone else
Joe,
can see it, all right?
I can see it. Can someone put a thumbs up in the chat? What about if I go through the introductions in the meantime?
It's strange, isn't it?
Yeah, do you want to do the introductions, Lucy, and then if I can do the agenda if Joe
I
can't
can
see
run
it.
through the agenda because I've got the a version on my desktop, but I'm just not seeing it in the meeting. So I'll quickly run through the agenda. So we've got welcome and introductions, which Lucy's going to do. Then an update on the previous tag report, general updates, technical discussions, other business and questions, information channels, and meeting close.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. I'll try and...
So I guess moving on to introductions, hoping to all get to know each other a bit more and learn about where we all, our background. So I'm going to read out the names, and if you can give a short introduction for yourself. So Andrew Edwards.
How you doing? Sorry, I've got a bit of a cold at the moment.
That's all right. Hi, Andrew.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, my name's Andrew Edwards. I work for Federation University Australia. Got a mechanical and auto electrical background, and my role with the university at the moment is setting up some renewable training programs for wind tower technicians.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. We've got another Andrew, Andrew Hewitt. Are you there, Andrew?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So I'm Andrew Hewitt from the Electrical Safety Office in Brisbane, Queensland. So our interest in this area is obviously managing safety around all the development of renewables and making sure that people are suitably competent and qualified to perform those activities safely.
Great. And next is Robert Armstrong.
Morning, all. Yeah, I'm in Brisbane. I look after training and development at CS Energy, and I suppose to put it in a very short description, we're in transition from the coal-fired power station across into all the renewable space. So that's our challenge.
Thank you for attending, Robert. And apologies, I'm going blind with age. Brian Inglis.
Morning, all. Live in Brisbane, ex-power station operator, Latrobe Valley, Pilbara, CS Energy. Sorry, from ops to training. I was the training manager for CS for a while. Then I went to LNG Land for about 9 years. Now I'm an independent consultant. And yeah, good to be part of this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for attending. Lindsay Eisman.
Yeah, good morning. So I'm the principal advisor for HSE training and competency for Origin, and my team looks after all of the power generation sites, LPG, and pretty much all the other functional areas within Origin as well.
Thank you so much for coming along, Lindsay. And we're moving to Emma Bacon.
Morning all, I'm Emma Bacon. I'm the Learning and Development Manager for Territory Generation. So we're a government-owned corporation in the Northern Territory that delivers power to most of the major centres in the Territory and some of the regions and smaller regional ones as well.
And James Pilbeam, I know, is down in Melbourne. Are you there, James?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm manager for the Centre for You Industry Training Centre in Melbourne.
Thank you so much. Neil Roberts.
Hi there, I'm Neil Roberts, the Director for Policy, Technical and Safety at the National Electrical and Communications Association. And my most recent background was in the safety regulator in New South Wales, looking at electrical qualification and risk.
Wonderful. I see Mark Burgess has joined. Mark.
Oh, sorry, mate. Just caught the end of Neil. G'day, Neil. Mark Burgess from Energy Skills Australia. Had a bit to do with the generation package in the last edition, through the last model. Morning, everybody.
We also welcome Michael Cullen. Michael, otherwise I will move on. Sarah Brunton.
Morning, everyone. Sarah Brunton, ETU National Technical Officer. I'm based in Darwin on Larrakia lands, and today I'm coming to you from Catherine.
Fantastic. And finally, Stephen Bryant.
Yes, good morning all. Steve Bryant, Critical Maintenance Manager, Engineering Industries in Victoria.
Great. Back to you, Brett.
Yeah, and Brett Willow-White, Technical Training and Skills Standards PSO. Have we missed, is there anyone online that was missed? We also had Peter and Phil from PSO online.
Oh, the PSO introduction.
That's right.
Myself and Adam,
Oh,
perhaps?
sorry, and yes, we forgot our champion. So Joe, who opened the meeting, Joe Abbey. So do you want to?
Yeah, so Joe Abbey, principal of the RTO for Oricon. So we're deliver training from the generation training package, have done for a number of years across Australia.
And also Adam West is our other UEP champion.
Yeah, hi everyone.
And from the
Adam West
PSO side, I apologise. I am Lucy Garrity. I work in industry engagement. I'm based in Brisbane. On the call also, I have Brett Willow-White. If you would like to introduce yourself, Brett.
I'll just let Adam go. Adam, do you want to just?
Thanks, guys. Yeah, Adam West, TAFE New South Wales. I met a few of you at the last TAG meeting and looking forward to the conversations today. My background's electrician, electrical teacher, and then working in corporate space in TAFE for a while now. And my current remit is understanding the workforce and training requirements, especially for the renewable sector across New South Wales, but also collaborating with others across the country. Thank you.
Thanks,
Apologies, Adam. I didn't realise I'd spoken over you. We also have Vicky Guittardo, who is our General Manager of Strategy and Delivery. And Stephen Hall, our General Manager of Projects. Lisa Harmer, our Senior Manager of Communications. And Kaya Morales, who is our Event Coordinator.
Michael, are you online now? Michael Cullen?
Yes, I am. Sorry, my sound wasn't working. So I'm Michael Cullen, Executive Officer of Future Energy Skills, Victoria's industry training advisory body.
Thanks, Michael. So I think we've got everyone now. So the champions will be chairing the technical discussion later, but I'll just run through a couple of things first to do with the previous tag. So just our last tag, we had 22 registered for UEP and 17 attend. And out of the 17, we had 12 people complete the request for advice, which was good. Out of that group, as you can see on the pie charts there, a fairly good representation of employers, nearly just under a third, and then a pretty even split between public and private RTOs as well. And 35% of people identify as being national, and then a pretty good cross-section across the states, probably reflective of the population of the states. So there'll be a request for advice go out after this meeting. So I just encourage you to fill that in with any issues that are on that. It's one of our communication ways, which we'll talk about a bit later, some of the other ones as well. So it was pretty broad, our last UEP meeting. So we talked about the challenges with the transition away from fossil fuels and emerging technologies, what's required. And we're going to pick that up a bit more again today, particularly around the wind and the hydrogen area today. We're going to have a bit of focus on. We do have another technical issue to raise today too that's come through our channels. And again, that with the skill sets, that will be part of the discussion. Is it skill sets? Is it quals? What actually belongs in the UEP, particularly in that hydrogen space? But there's a fair bit of crossover with UEG, and then also probably the PMA packages. So we'll talk a bit more to that down the track. So you should have all received a general updates with your meeting invites and the agenda. So we sent that out just to stop double ups across. We got a bit of feedback that, we're covering the same thing. People who are attending multiple tags were hearing the same sort of information. So we've sent out some general information that's relevant across all the tags. So we didn't have to go through that here, but welcome for questions later on that. But I did just want to highlight a couple of areas where internally we've been approved to follow up on, and that's a unit in the HVAC and the UET rescue units, having a look at a revision of basically the prerequisites and also the application, the wording in some of the application of those units, trying to get some consistency. There were 7 units in all that ASCA extended the teach out period of. So the new version of those 7, with Phil and I just tidying up our submission to DUA to get that project started. But why I wanted to talk about it here is if we have issues with UEP, it'd be the same process. If it's a major change to the training package, we'd need to follow that training package organisational framework, set up a technical committee, go out to public for feedback once we have a draft from that technical committee. So any of these which we've got coming up in the technical discussion that raise an issue that we want to push forward as an activity, they'd go through the same process as those. So we might move on to a technical discussion now. And if Joe's going to lead us through this first area.
I'm assuming my camera's back on because I've got no vision. Yeah, great. Thanks, Brett. So the first technical discussion item for today, it's a good one, UEP ops units, including high voltage HV switching, currently have no prerequisite requirements for units that are specialised and high risk work areas. And so the questions for discussion are, is there a need for prerequisites for these units? If required, what prerequisites would be suitable? And I'm sure most people are aware that in UET, there are similar types of units that do have fairly strong prerequisite change. Sorry, I've got the flu also. Chains. So the units specifically with no prerequisites that we were wanting to have a discussion about, Ops 116, operate local HV switchgear. Ops 036, develop HV switching programs. Ops 021, control permit to work operations. Ops 124, perform switching to a switching program. And Ops 117, operate local LV switchgear. So I guess maybe just start broadly about the concept of the need for prerequisites for these units, and I guess see where we go from there. Not sure if anyone has any thoughts that they want to share.
Is there anyone online that delivers these units?
We do. Oricon do.
Yeah, there are. Last time I looked, there was about 18 or 20 RTOs that have these on their scope. And the reason I threw up some of these questions is in my previous role as a regulator, we'd come across incidents and businesses out in the general population who were utilising these units to authorise high voltage operators in a non-generation context. But equally, if we're going to a renewables context, so wind farms and those types of things, we've actually had incidents on wind farms where inexperienced personnel have been authorised using these units and have ended up in rather serious incidents. So I put it forward genuinely as a problem that RTOs are looking at these units and offering them to general population without the rigour of underlying qualifications and experience.
So
I understand in the traditional generation sector, these units would have only been offered to experienced plant operators, which is fair enough. I don't want to interfere with that process. But yeah, there's a genuine need there to ensure people that are undertaking these units have the underlying knowledge to carry them out.
Neil, for that, I can say as an RTO, we have certainly experienced when students come to us with certificates from other RTOs where they have done some HV course or some switching course that has been, the outcome has been both the generation switching units and the TDR switching units as well. And the problem for us, because we don't take, like, we always do a prerequisite check, and so the 5-day course or whatever the person has done the switching in would result in them getting the generation units and the TDR units with no evidence of, like, for example, them having not worked on networks makes it impossible for them to meet all the prerequisite requirements of that. So that's another problem that we've often, well, occasionally, I should say, come across.
If I could make a comment, if allowed, I can't see the chat things up on the screen, unfortunately. Sorry.
Yeah.
Somebody else is before me. If not, I think those units, and I've raised it with Neil and other people, including ASPA in the past, is that those units aren't being used correctly in terms of the application of that unit, which requires a person to be in the operations area. Anybody outside being an operator shouldn't be entitled to go into those units, although it doesn't require prerequisites. It's very clear what the application of those units state, that you should be an operator inside the electricity industry in the generation sector. And we're intended that way always.
Thanks, Tony. Mark Burgess, you got your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. 100% agree with what Neil was saying. And I think when you were at the regulator, Neil, we had some conversation about this a few years ago, but the intention of these units, and Tony is right, is for operators within traditional coal-fired power stations, to be honest. They generally have a lot of experience, they generally have trade backgrounds, and they generally have that underpinning knowledge, but they have been bastardised and they have been used more broadly across the industry, and it's causing issues. So the issue of prerequisites needs to be looked at in these units.
Yeah, and I think that's going to become, with the move to solar farms and wind and stuff, it's going to become more prevalent where you got those private networks and stuff too. So I'd really like to hear thoughts on, so I think no one's saying we don't need some sort of prereqs. Here's some thoughts on what prereqs might be suitable, because we also don't want to block those operators. So I'd be interested in that, particularly you guys who are working in that space.
Yeah, Brett, if I could just jump in from CS, what we do here. Yeah, we utilise all of these units for our HV switching roles, and they are the more experienced. No need to be on site and demonstrate other things before they get nominated to be able to go on the course. And then when they come back, you know, there's some level of assurance as well. But the in the specific switching area, we only have electricians, heavy industry electricians doing these courses. But there is other components, I suppose, there's supervision of this and things where they may not be electricians. So that's another issue altogether. So the prerequisites that we apply is one, plant competence to start with before they can go on this, and then also I suppose the prerequisite is that they are an experienced electrician. Now I know the standards don't clearly spell that out, but that's how we apply it.
Thanks, Rod.
I think if we collaborated on the operator statement within the application to become the prerequisite, it'll probably clarify things.
So we will have this in our request for advice. So because sometimes, you know, in the light of day after the meeting, you think of something that you could add to that you might not have thought of while we're talking about it. So please go onto that and have a look, and maybe for the people who are operating in that space, have a look at the units, what that application says now. I think the only issue, Tony, with the application is that it's clearly not being followed anyway. So do we need to make it a bit more enforced by actually having those prereqs? Brian?
Yeah, I think if you reinforce it by putting it in the prereq statement, you know, at the end of the day, ASCRA's not doing its job. Neil, I know Neil raised a matter with ASCRA some time ago. I raised it with them as well. They never pursued it, unfortunately. So yeah, clarity in the prereq was very important.
Yep. We got Brian with his hand up.
Yeah, look, I come from an operational background. I must admit it was a long time ago, but you know, operating plants for, let's say, 25, 30 years. So did all this stuff. And it's interesting, in Victoria, we couldn't switch, but I went to WA and I could switch HV. And then the laws changed, and then I couldn't switch HV. I'm just wondering whether there will be issues between the states. You know, we're supposed to be a federation. However, we don't tend to operate that way. One thing I'll say is the permitting side of things, I would not make any. Every industry has their own different permitting system. So in my view, I wouldn't be putting prerequisites with the permitting side. I think definitely the HV, but I would have thought that was already by law, you cannot switch without an electrical license. And also, you know, my time at CS Energy, we had a very robust system of ensuring people had the right competencies within the entity. So if we make it too hard, it might not get followed. It might not get followed anyway. And what if people don't follow it? Like I said, I'm from ops. I'm not from an RTO perspective, so I guess I look at things differently. I haven't probably solved any issues, but I've just thought I'd say my piece.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, I
might.
I might just talk to that one for a second. And the reason I've raised it in the way I have, and I don't want to exclude people that have the plant operators that have traditionally done it have been the subject of long years of training and experience on their plant. We don't want to exclude those. And we've kind of handled that in the UET package in the past by recognising craft certificates and that type of thing for the purposes of people having authorisations to operate on networks. But, you know, like with any framework you put in place, you've got RTOs that do a good job of it, and then you've got RTOs that will advertise for non-licensed people to do a high voltage operating course in 3 or 4 days online. That rings alarm bells for me, especially given some of the behaviours I've seen. And so we can work on a set of prerequisites which are not overly restrictive, but at least drag those RTOs to a point where they've got to genuinely consider and maybe knock back some students who are not really suitable.
I think that's a really fair call. Yeah.
And Brian, did you still have your hand up, or did you put up again?
Just to, in my view, again, from an operations perspective, I would have thought the responsibility is with the company employing or contracting that person to do the right thing and the due diligence to look and say, yes, you've done the course, great, thanks, well done. However, in this context, in this business, you can't just do a short course and then come in and switch. I see that falls to the organisation to have the right systems and processes in place. But maybe I'm coming from a different angle. I don't know.
Thanks, Brian. Sarah Button. You on mute, Sarah? We can't hear you, Sarah, if you're speaking. We might just go to Lindsay and we can come back to you, Sarah, if there's you got a tech issue.
Yeah, sorry, Brett.
Rightio, go ahead. You're in Catherine, so.
Yeah, I know. I got stuck here because of that accident on the highway last night. We literally had to turn around and come back. So we'll head back after this meeting. Yeah, we've heard, similar to whoever was speaking just previously, we've had reports to us about some of the dodgy RTOs delivering some units online that we think's pretty dodgy. So certainly support the conversation about looking at potential prereqs for some of this, but also in mind with one of the other previous speakers who we don't want to block what's already out there in industry that's going well. So I think it's worth a deeper conversation.
Yep. And the biggest, some good points can probably be added to that request for advice around that pre-existing. Lindsay Eisman.
Yep. Again, as per a previous comment, so as an asset owner, just because someone's got a unit of competency doesn't mean that you're going to allow them to do something unless you've got the assurance and checks in behind it. You think of the same and be like a forklift license. Just because someone's got a forklift license doesn't mean you're going to automatically let them run around the forklift on site. Okay, and we do use it for both operators, maintainers, but also for contractors. So we do track and capture that, and then that sort of feeds, once the assurance is done, then they're set up in the permitting system to be able to carry out those activities following the procedures that are set. So prerequisites, probably a nice thing to have, but just remember that the assets should be maintaining control over what happens on site anyway, and have that responsibility.
Thanks, Lindsay. Hammond.
Good morning to you. Thank you. I am at Fortescue, and all or most of our electricians are in the supporting roles for mining operations, and we require them to have licenses. And of late, we have been dealing with maybe the requirements for high voltage switching operations. And I agree that the 14 units possibly that are in discussion here should be given more time. And I feel the 4-day courses that we are seeing here and there possibly maybe they are okay for those holding licenses, but the moment you include non-technical people and they are getting 9 units in 4 days, even if you go back to the nominal hours that we could use in training, this doesn't seem right. Here, I think the problem could be changed via the volume of learning, the content that's involved in these units, and how it is delivered. How it's delivered, meaning can it be delivered one-on-one or with the trainer in front of people and practical exercises completed. Other than that, it's difficult to regulate and control RTOs when they see an opportunity to use that or these number of units and get easy money out of it. So while we can say organizations as employers can try to check people who hold these units, I think that's too late because checking is a bit difficult. If you check, you're not going to train people really. It's already too late at that stage.
Thanks, Hammond. Some good points and good to have Fortescue on board. Emma Bacon?
Are we, the prerequisites, are we looking at trying to implement them to stop the, the online assessments and everything, or should we be looking at the way the assessment is within those units to then move away from RTOs being able to deliver that online and, do the practical component online? Like, is that the issue, or is it that we do need some prerequisites in there?
I think there's 2 issues, if I can jump in. There's one, the online delivery of high risk and technical, maybe there's some, anyway, so there's the online delivery piece, but there's also ensuring that the correct audience is attending the training, regardless of the delivery mode. Is that right? Is that how people are seeing it?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Looking at those units, technically, I don't think they should be allowed to deliver it online because, my memory of the operate high voltage switchgear or perform switching to a switching program is that it'd be very hard to justify delivering that online. I think it pretty much suggests
that operate.
Has to be done
the word
in
operate,
the workplace.
sort of, yeah.
And I think there is a few other units. I just put those ones in as sort of the main discussion points. Joe, just throwing back to you about that permit one, because someone mentioned about maybe leave permits alone, but we had that discussion the other day. Did you want to?
Yeah. So my only thoughts were, yes, obviously, maybe the prerequisite is something more like before you can control a permit system, so not specifically the structure of the permit system, but what's people's view on before somebody can control a permit process, should they not have apply or, have some sort of apply or work under permit? So some prerequisite experience in actually working in a permit system before they're able to control it. I guess that was my question, my thinking. Or can you just go straight off the street to, not literally, to control, but can you start at controlling a permit system?
If I could suggest, well, again, it depends on the organisation, but I would suggest no. There's a bunch of things that need to be in place before you can go into the permit operations.
Yeah.
But I can't talk. I can only talk for major like power plants and LNG plants, quite robust in their systems. I sort of can't talk to the small. But gee, I would have thought maybe you're wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just not quite sure what would be in it.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but I just question whether you can go straight to controlling permits.
I can suggest something on there. Most bigger operations and organizations wouldn't hire someone into controlling permits from nowhere. Most of these people who reach the level of a permit controller would have worked through the organization in possibly a number of areas, maybe maintenance, repair, and health and safety. until they reach a position where they know the overall picture of the operations they are about to control their permits. Most likely they would have worked in the actual work like a technician who has been working in an area, having signed permits prior, and now is the one in charge of them for other operators.
Thanks, Hammond. And I'll throw to Sarah, but just I think everyone's in agreement that the main providers are definitely going to have that process internally anyway. The concern is around with emerging technologies and some of these private generation spaces. What happens there, Sarah Brunton?
Yeah, I agree with the previous speaker that I think the larger operators are probably pretty experienced and usually do that pretty well because of their understanding and the resources that they have as well. But considering some of the smaller operators may not have those same resources or understanding of what the hazards are too, often the people making those decisions won't be people like us who are electricians with technical backgrounds and having that full understanding. But I don't think that you should be controlling a permit system if you've just turned up to that site. You need to go through a process. It's really dangerous, as we all know.
Tony's got his hand up. Tony Palladino.
Yeah, the question here is about the prerequisite advice you give an RTO for the unit of competence. We've got to remember what we're trying to do here. Is it okay for a school-based RTO, for example, to allow a school kid to walk straight into that unit? That's what currently some people would interpret. Because there's not enough information in the prerequisite statement to clarify the entry point. That's all you have to talk about. You're trying to provide advice to an RTO before they make an assessment decision on that unit. And that's got to be something that says, I'm a school kid, can I get into that? Because currently you probably could if you're an RTO, a school-based RTO, if you had it on scope. That's what we're trying to guard against. The industry knows how to protect the internal arrangements. So I'm not worried about the industry. They know how to deal with it. It's a question of a rogue RTO pops in unintentionally or intentionally and then says, well, you know, for a few extra bucks, I'll put them online. And they're from overseas, most of the kids that come in, students, learners. I don't call them students, they're candidates. And then it's okay because there's no prevention from them entering and I can make a buck as an RTO.
Yep, and I think that's probably the concern we've got, Tony. Neil?
And just to add to that point, it's, you know, some businesses out there will go to RTOs for advice about what courses they can do, and won't necessarily be aware enough of the structure of the trade and the hazards to select correctly. And that was my experience as a regulator, that, you know, 11 kV network on Sydney Airport, and they're trying to authorise an engineer that's turned up from overseas with no switching experience, and they put him through a 3 or 4 day course online. Now, when that happens, you know, the PCBUs are getting a bad advice from the RTOs. This will help prevent that.
Yeah, Joe?
Oh, and I was pretty much going to agree with that. So from an RTO perspective, the more prescriptive information that there is in a unit that takes away any sort of grey area enables you, one, to better prepare for what you're going to deliver, better selection of students and better advice to employers. So and particularly even when you're having a conversation with an employer about this course is going to take this long, it's like, what? And you can always go back to a unit and you know, the importance of pre-checking students and so that information being clearly in the background of a unit of competence or a qualification definitely is helpful, I think, for an RTO also. We would definitely welcome it.
Adam?
I was just going to support what you said earlier, Brad, around, you know, the transition. The renewable transition is a bit of a different space. You know, we're starting to see different things float to the surface. So historically, when we visited supply authorities or big organisations like BlueScope, it's quite obvious, and, you know, you can see it from a mile away that people have come up through, you know, the right sort of backgrounds with a lot of experience before they're involved in high voltage switching and operations and permits and things like that. Whereas when we go out to some of the wind farms and solar farms in New South Wales, at least, you don't get that sense necessarily. You know, there's people being qualified in these areas or, you know, completing these types of units and completing those sorts of operations without that sort of rigor in their background, which is a bit of concern. So I'd support that, thinking that it's a changing landscape that we're not really used to, which might underpin a need for a change to the way we assess who's eligible to do this sort of training.
Sort of building it in up the front before something it's reactive.
Yep. Tony, was your hand still up, or did you have another?
No, sorry about that.
No, you're right. Look, that's been some really good points there. So we'll definitely, I might get Pete Adams, if you're online. Can you just pop an action item into the chat to follow up on that? And there's certainly some expertise in this room that we'll be tapping into. I think we need to move forward with it. Have a look at all the units in that qual around the ops units and how we go about. Do we put prereqs in? Is it a statement in the prereqs that refers to the application to beef that up? But we'll certainly be relying on a few of you people who've spoken today to pass on your expertise when we get to progressing that as an activity. So has anyone else, before we move on to the next one, has anyone got anything on that? Anything else on that they want to add? But we'll definitely, thanks, Pete. And thanks, Hammonds, throwing up an idea for a prereq, which seems to get used as a prereq for everything. But whether we need a bit more UEP flavoured, possibly. But Sarah, you got one more before we?
Yeah, I just had one more comment, Brett. I just thought that I was just looking at the link that was in the chat to the TPOF, the Training Package Organising Framework, which, as we know, is the work being done looking at that by the Qualifications Reform Design Group. I'm just wondering if that's like maybe things like this, issues like this might be a good thing to inform that group about, because if it's happening here in this training package, it's probably happening in others as well, and it might be something that's bigger picture as well as something that obviously the prereqs need to be looked at here too.
Yep. So with that reform work, we've actually got all the UEP quals down as one of. We had to provide at least 40 quals, so we chose all the UEPs, all the UETs, and then a selection of the UEEs and all the UEGs. So the qual that these sit in will definitely be part of that reform work. So yeah, but it is a good point.
Thanks, Brett.
Phil, because you more across the reform than me.
Oh no, it wasn't about the reform in particular. I was just mentioned. I've been listening to that conversation, and you mentioned about there's been mention about RTOs maybe not doing the right thing and dodgy RTOs. Just remember that ASQA is open to anyone who wanted to comment on an RTO that might be not doing the right thing, and PSO generally support that, because I think anybody in the industry would like to make sure that there's RTOs that are striving so hard to do the right thing, and then you see those RTOs that may be not doing the right thing. So we support, if anyone has that open line, you can do it anonymously if you'd like, but it would be better for the industry as a whole to weed out potentially those people that may not be doing the right thing all the time. So just a little comment there. Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, and I think it was Hammond who raised about 4-day course for 9 units, which, you've got to justify your volume of learning if ASQA do come knocking. So, yeah, it's a good point, Phil. So I think we can probably move on to our next. I might throw over to Adam West. Is everyone's happy there? Adam West.
Great, thanks for that, Brett. Just mentioning a point about the previous topic. Actually, when I brought up around visiting wind farms and solar farms, a big challenge is around workforce. So what we're finding is that, you know, a lot of these projects and I can only speak from New South Wales perspective really, is that, you know, because the renewable energy zones are in regional areas that typically haven't seen this large sort of infrastructure build in the past, that the organisations themselves are struggling to find the people they need. So sometimes there'll be a bit of incentive there, I guess, to bring someone on that might not have typically come through those rigorous type training backgrounds to do these sort of roles. So it's something to keep in mind as well, potentially. Sorry, I should have put my hand up, Brad, in the right forum. This one here is about, is there a need to develop a wind tower service technician qualification and apprenticeship? And the points for consideration are that areas that wind tower service technicians would need to be proficient in: mechanical, electrical, hydraulics, bolt tensioning and torquing. And a service technician would have the ability to service, fault find, conduct repairs and isolate systems in a safe manner. Industry is finding when they employ qualified electricians, fitters, mechanics, that they have shortfalls in their technical knowledge. Some internal training will always be required due to the closed nature of IP and different systems. So I just thought I'll open this to the floor, but I think Robert Armstrong, did you have a point to make in this space? Did you want to lead the initial discussion?
I think it was Andrew Edwards, this one. Adam.
Oh, did I get it wrong, did I? Oh, yeah, I'm ahead of
Robert's the
myself.
next one.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Andrew, are you there? Being a bit of an expert in this area?
learning about this area. So the background that I've started to look into is training that I undertook over in the United States of America. The BZEE training program effectively comes out of Europe, and it's a 6-month intensive full-time course that covers those technical areas, but we don't have anything in Australia that's similar. So the use of the program in Europe is effectively taking a qualified tradesperson and giving them training in the respective areas that they have shortfalls in. Whereas in America, they're using the program as a workforce building tool to give applicants and prospective students the core skill sets, and then they go back off to industry to build on that in a manufacturer's environment with manufacturer training. One thing that the industry in Australia is finding is just a shortfall in staffing across the board, and they will typically employ electricians to do that isolation type work, but then the electricians will be called upon to do mechanical diagnostics, hydraulic diagnostics, and everyday servicing tasks such as bolt tensioning and torquing. So it's a fairly small crew that goes up to wind tower service, usually a 2-person crew. And typically they're backed up with an electrician and a fitter, or usually a couple of electricians. So we've looked through the packages as a university to see if we could find something that aligns with the BZEE training that I've undertaken, but we've looked across multiple engineering, electrical, mechanical packages, and there's not one thing that really fits. So we just want to see what the appetite was to generate an apprenticeship. BZEE is about 1,000 hours worth of training. Generate a type of apprenticeship that's recognised by industry for a service technician. Any thoughts on that?
Would that technician primarily be an electrical person with a maybe a mechanical flavour, or just sort of sense of what it might look like, this person?
The person needs to be a good all-rounder in everything. So at the moment, they're typically grabbing electricians out of industry, but as you know, there's a fair shortfall in it. So the main call for the electrician is, of course, our licensing regulations in Australia are quite strict on what mechanics can access in the electrical cabinets, just to isolate the piece of equipment that they're going to work on and service. So it's one of the primary reasons for it. But typically the technicians, if you're a qualified electrician working up in a tower, you'll get back-end training eventually to try and help you out the other systems that you'll be working on. The fitters will be trained in the hydraulics and mechanical bolt tensioning, but typically not in the electrical stuff because they can't go anywhere near it.
Lindsay?
Yeah, well, look, I think having additional pathways is probably good. So I guess you've got new to industry, completely new to industry people. You could run through it as an apprenticeship. But then also thinking about, so if you're bringing on existing electricians or fitters, really having the skill set to address it as well. So I think you sort of got to just look at the pathways to make sure you capture for both. But yeah, if they're not coming in as electricians, then obviously there's going to be limitations on what they're going to be able to do.
I think this conversation follows on neatly from the previous one. If you can have people from various trades trained to do the isolation switching that they need to carry out specific activities, but they're not necessarily coming up with switching programs. Particularly on wind farms, my experience of wind farms is that you've got 30 or so or more turbines and only a couple of different isolation processes, so that if they're genuinely followed, they can, as long as they don't step outside that and making up their own switching programs, they can be trained to do the basic switching.
Thanks, Neil. Hammond had his hand up.
Yeah, I feel this qualification area is a new to us, and it's a challenge also as we see it. We are part of the people who have been submitting or trying to lobby that this has to be looked at. We feel it requires at this stage 2 distinct qualifications, one being mechanical and the other one electrical. We felt because of the area being new, we are not so sure how this will eventuate, how this will change, and will it require a standalone apprenticeship to do it, or should we continue with finding skill sets for each qualification area, being mechanical, having electrical, we take onto, or being electrical, we go into the mechanical area and find skill sets for electrician. But in the end, I accept that it is an area of maybe future development where we would want to see maybe a standalone qualification. However, that has to be determined by the rest of Australia to say there will be enough people or enough demand for such a labor, a new labor market trend or pathway that we develop. The 4 areas that are listed in the mechanical, electrical, hydraulics, and board tensioning, actually all electricians should be knowing something about board tensioning, and the mechanics will also know about hydraulics and board tensioning. Combining them into one qualification can be a very good thing if we've got one hybrid person. But my concern at this stage is, are we going to have enough demand that a qualification can have full classes across the country and making that training viable?
Yeah, that's a good point, Hammond. I think we've got Sarah with her hand up.
Just having that internet issue again, Brett. I'll come back to you in a sec. Sorry.
Okay, I know what Catherine's like for internet. Andrew, I just wonder after what people have been saying, your thoughts around that. Like, I mean, obviously, and I think that's what Joe's maybe getting to. If you want to elaborate, you got something in the chat, Joe, about do we have fitters and upskill them, and have electricians and upskill them, or do we?
Well, like in some of the UET, yeah, there's different. So there's a transmission pathway, there's a distribution pathway, there's a cable. So you could do the same sort of thing as Hammond was saying. Have, if the base trade is electrical or the base trade is mechanical, then have a pathway to, upskill.
Yep.
the gap. Yeah.
James Pilbeam, sorry.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. I've just come from my car into the office. So I believe that, you know, performing electrical work as a licensed trade has to be protected. I've worked around wind farms and I've been around wind farms and involved in training. And the electrical component part, we're connected to the grid. And ultimately we're trying to, you know, protect, you know, as the access, person's property and livestock. And someone unskilled in that area that hasn't done the electrical training under our requirements, our on-the-job requirements, we're going to find people coming out with a licence that have never touched a pair of pliers at all.
Thanks, James. Sarah, are you back online or?
Yeah, thanks. Yep, it's a bit crappy today. I might have to turn my camera off in a sec. Agree with what James said there as well. And the licensing component is certainly a significant concern in this area. We certainly do not support watering down the electrical trade in any way, shape or form. I think that there's a lot of different bits of information out there about this. It's not like the wind turbines are a new thing that's just popped up yesterday. It's been going on for a little while. There's a lot of industry knowledge out there. There's a lot of ETU members who are out there working on these things. And I suppose the other point to that is just the continued consultation. Like if you are heading down a path of having this conversation, certainly including making sure all the right people are at the table to have it, especially the workers doing the work.
Yeah, agree, Sarah. And this is really an initial opening of that conversation. We're not about to start writing a qual soon, but I guess it's finding out if there is that
I'll
need.
be knocking on your door, Brad, if that happened.
Yeah.
The other point to that as well is as the ETU and Master Electricians are two of the founding members of PSO, there's the Centre of Excellence, the Renewables Centre of Excellence up in Queensland there. And I'm just wondering if there's anyone on the call today from Electro Group and the Centre of Excellence up there.
I don't think there is.
They would be a great contribution to this conversation.
Yep. Tony?
Yeah, I just want to raise, because there's a bit of a myth going around. I don't know if anybody's ever read the Job Skills Australia reports or the ones that former commission that occurred previously. There's always been a promotion around the idea that there's a wind turbine technician occupation. We've got to recognise the fact that it's not an occupation, it's a job. A very key importance about how you construct qualifications in training packages and units of competence. There is no such occupation, same as solar electricians. People run around talking about solar electricians. There are no solar electricians. It's a job within an occupation, which is typically electrical. It could be mechanical in terms of wind turbine, depending on the bias that they have. But we've got to be really careful about how we handle that from a qualification point of view.
Thanks, Tony. I might just throw back to Andrew. Sorry, I want to go back to you before, Andrew Edwards.
Yeah.
Just on your thoughts of some of the things that have been brought up.
Yeah, interesting discussions. The electrical side's the part that we're struggling on at the moment with any qualifications that we bring up and we look at currently. Our pathways into it would be good to further investigate the mechanical type workers. 4-year apprenticeship's the standard for an electrician or a 4-year training contract, but a lot of the people that come into the industry already have background skills in that. Is there a type of training that we could do to upskill mechanics through an apprenticeship type scheme, but not have it as long? Is that ever going to be a possibility?
You could construct the certificate for apprenticeship, depending on, because it's a fairly highly technical job you're talking about. And I've raised this in previous forums, is sometimes we see the certificate 3 as the sort of linchpin of everything. And that's really an entry point into the industry. And when I look at wind turbine technicians, I tend to think, from my experience, has an electrical background and electrical fitter, that it's probably likely around about certificate 4 in terms of its work, and you could build an apprenticeship around that program. And we've got to be careful about talking about training, because we're not talking about training. We're trying to write down what the description of work is of what people do in order to construct an occupational outcome. Then we can do the training as a buttress to that type of outcome that we need.
So something Adam, we've seen is that in regional areas, a bit, well, I think what Andrew was alluding to, some part of the challenge now is because of the changing landscape, these large infrastructure projects happening in regional areas, the challenges with workforce. So, you know, often the electricians aren't there to be employed. And then because there's mines often nearby where they're being offered more money, but the future workforce is seen as being at school at the moment, you know. So, and then the other challenge is we realise that we want qualified electricians on site, but then when we try and encourage the wind companies to employ electrical apprentices, they can't offer the scope of work. So it's a real challenge around trying to, you know, meet the workforce demand and needs and provide a pipeline. And at the moment, the way it's structured is the only way is to really try and build some sort of group training model where the group trainers have the apprentices and farm them out to various organisations, and get the wind companies to collaborate with other industries locally. So all those sorts of discussions are happening. You know, you sort of go, well, if you did have an apprenticeship in this area, just before I start that. So typically now someone wants to be a wind turbine technician, you know, they employ fitters or electricians from what I've seen so far. And then they'll work with the company that owns the asset, like General Electric or Vestas, to do the actual specific wind turbine training. And then I'll do the Global Wind Organisation with someone like Federation who Andrew is associated with, you know. So, but so that's the pathway at the moment. But when we're trying to feed in, you know, school leavers and bring in jobs for local people, I think that's where we're seeing a future challenge. Yeah.
Thanks, Adam. Neil?
Yeah, you beat me to it, Adam, because I was just about to suggest group training is a fantastic way to get that breadth of technical knowledge, because, the problem in those regional areas is the lack of workforce, you know, ready to step into those roles to be trained with all that background knowledge. And I've certainly been to an incident where a metal fabrication tradesperson was doing an apprenticeship, but I don't know how he was going to get his wiring experience, because he was just on the wind farm, and he was trained in high voltage and ended up having an incident. So the health of the entire industry, I think, would increase if you could provide a pathway that provided that breadth to train people up.
Yep, thanks, Neil. Sarah?
Yeah, just one other thing I wanted to add, I missed saying before, was just the consideration of industrial implications potentially when mixing trades together as well. There's the potential for major industrial consequences there too.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Look, I think we're I think, Tony, your hand's just still up, is it? Look, it's obviously not something we're going to solve today, but it is something that we need to have a lot more consultation around. So certainly, if you've got some more thoughts on the matter after the meeting, go through our website, provide us some information. Adam, are you happy if we move on?
Certainly, Brett.
Over to you.
All right, so this one, as you can see, is about hydrogen fueled power plants, and the discussion is around what areas of training need to be in the UEP package from a hydrogen perspective. Is there an opportunity for skill sets or new qualifications? And is there already existing crossover with UEG and PMA packages? And I think, Robert Armstrong, you might have had a point to make in this space. Is that right? I'm sorry to make you panic earlier, asking you to talk about wind farms.
Yeah, I thought I was going to be out of my depth there. Yeah, look, this comes out of a chat with Brett a few weeks ago, and not so much around only training and RTOs, but the whole process that I think a few of us have probably been through when you're changing industries. So for me, I started out in oil, gas came in, you know, you were in one type of mining, then gold or another product, you know, you move, but there's similarities when you do shift. And that's what we're finding with hydrogen for us. And when you're building a new plant, you have, you know, we've got 12 or 15 OEMs that supply and build the plant. And then with that, they have a little box on the bottom of the contract that says that they'll do some training, which it's not what we call training normally. And then you've got to pick up, I suppose I'll just go through some of the challenges we've been having with our hydrogen development plant, which is I suppose, comparatively small unit out at Chinchilla in Queensland. And what we've found, and it was similar with LNG plants that I've been involved with previously, although on a much smaller scale, is that you have a graded pit, you put your foundations down, and you have a variety of professionals come in to build the plant for you. Their failure to provide really openness around what they're doing and how to operate and maintain it in the future is not really their core business. So, or it might be their core business, but they're not going to give it to someone else, you know. So extracting that information from the builders, the construction plant companies, is not an easy task. It's not fluid. And then what comes of that is in the background, you're trying to build in-house competencies. And even starting point is trying to design what their purpose, their role, job description, what task will this person, electricians, operators, technicians, what will they actually be doing with parts of the hydrogen plant? And so you're from a training perspective, then you're sort of caught with waiting for information before you can make firm decisions, but you don't have time to wait because it's about to go into pre-commissioning. They're already doing some work with the providers, the builders. And so then you start searching the landscape for an RTO or someone that's done this before, which we've done with a plant down in New South Wales, and then try and find out what their challenges were, which are very similar to ours. And then when you do find a couple of RTOs that are ready to go, I suppose in our local area, it's slim pickings. And like we're slightly ahead of the training providers' equipment and experience to deliver. And so then you would turn around and something I used to use in the past was first person competent. So who are we actually going to get to sign off our technicians are competent back in the workplace after they've had training, after the procedures are written, and they're following those procedures on a newly commissioned plant. And that's a real struggle. So in this case, I think the RTOs are, but well, they don't think they've been asking if I could be the first person competent. Now, I've never operated a hydrogen plant, but I know a bit about plant. But so then you get caught up in you need some equipment. And so then my selection of an RTO at the moment is which RTO has access to equipment. And that's really what then you can say, you can demonstrate not just in a classroom, you can contextualise the theory part of it, walk outside into their yard, because we haven't got the plant to practice on. So some sort of similar plant, electrolyzers or the likes, hooked up with PLCs or whatever it might be, to be able to say, this is what you're going to see in 12 months' time. And then once you've got that, some sort of simulated activity, you've got half a chance. Yeah. You know, so that's all that's the challenges we're amongst at the moment. I'll be interested in what others have done. I've been down this path before a few times over my career, but hydrogen's no different. Hydrogen plant technology and the training side, it's not only around training. It's not about only RTOs, but there is some challenges back in the workplace still before we even get to that. But I've got to be, we have readiness review, operational readiness reviews coming up. Then we need to be able to sign off. So what I'm doing, just for approach is, I'm doing a phased approach. I'm doing what I can with what I've got when I can. So I'm going to do phase 1 training, second phase, third phase of, you know, and the likes over the pre-commissioning and post-commissioning phase.
Thanks, Robert. Brian?
Yeah, we should have a chat, Rob. Very similar to the LNG industry when I started with Conoco. So I left CS Energy, enjoyed ConocoPhillips, and exactly the same. How do we get people competent when the equipment's not even there? The training packages really weren't suitable. There was no one able to train. Actually, in Australia, we went actually overseas to build the training packages and train people up. And what we did, we trained people to become competent, and then we backfilled it. We went back and then RPL to get the qual, because there's no way we could do it. So I think you got the right thinking, but it may not happen for some time. From a hydrogen perspective, so when I left Conoco 4 years ago, I used to operate hydrogen plants in the 80s, because most power stations make their own power hydrogen for cooling. These days, they just buy it from Coal Gas or BOC. But from the hydrogen perspective, CQU, well, DESBIT provided funding. Now, DESBIT's a Queensland government department, provided funding under the Vocational Energy Industries, sort of new industries funding last year. So CQU got some modules to build under the PMA and the UEG package, the gas industry package, but also TAFE Queensland got some as well. Now they're both available right now to do any of the hydrogen related, safety skill set. They are the two local providers I'm working with, more so CQU in Gladstone. Yeah, Mel Garrick's all over, and he's got a couple of electrolyzers actually now. I don't know if you've been there, but all the training rigs, ConocoPhillips bought and donated them there. So they're really well set up, and they've got trainers as well. So yeah, happy to have a chat if you want. Actually, I'm going to your facility next week for a look. Just go a tiny bit further. No, I won't talk about ammonia. I'll leave that be. But just back to the question, there are already packages built. Perhaps it's worth looking at what they are and what they cover, and say, well, what could be, taken and included in the UEP package. There are already skill sets identified or developed. So it's really just looking at those, the right set of buyers. Yeah, thanks, Brian. I'll just continue that a little bit if I could. Is that, yeah, we are dealing with both, and Gladstone CQU Centre seems to be ahead with equipment.
And that's sort of why we're selecting, whereas TAFE Queensland is waiting for equipment or the go forward. But I suppose we do have the units, but then we've got scope issues being told to us, you know, that we can look forward next year, that they'll have scope, and you've got to be confident that they'll get what they're talking about. And so we're doing what we can with in-scope. So if you step outside, you know, I've got a good history with PMA back in, you know, the earlier days, and then you start looking at units that are very similar, but they've been slightly adjusted. So that I'm confident that we're doing the right thing, but it hasn't been easy, not just from a training perspective, and I'm not even overly confident what we're selecting is going to be consistent with others, even though next year when we got the program running, there's 4 other companies will be joining that group at the same time. So I'm sort of confident, but that's if CQU gets scope, and which might take a bit longer than what they want. At the moment, we're just using the units that are in scope, and we're starting probably at that's what you have to do.
You don't have the ability, and you can't wait for it to happen. You just have to, like I say, get the material, have someone internal develop a training package, and it's that chicken and egg. You got to get someone deemed competent, and then you go from there. The other thing is, I guess you're talking about Arc Energy. They've got a very similar project which I was involved in Townsville. So, and I wouldn't worry about the consistency now. I think that will happen at some point. You're a leader in this space, so. Or John.
Hammond's got his hand up. Have you got a perspective on this, Hammond?
Yeah, at Fortescue, we do have hydrogen technology working for us already. We do have a manufacturing process that's making electrolyzers, and eventually we'll put them on the market for sale, really, to those organizations who want to produce hydrogen. We are producing hydrogen for use on our facilities in mine sites. We now have got hydrogen operating vehicles right now. We also are training people in the UEG package, and we are working with CQU. Like you mentioned, Peter Hilbeth and many others are already, we are in partnership with them. The reason we are training people in partnerships with training providers is because we do have the resources and the likely equipment they want to use. We are also working in WA with ATCO so that we can actually have them to deliver within our sites, because we would have the electrolyzers, we would have the facilities to transfer hydrogen if it needs training around transfer of hydrogen and use of hydrogen onto equipment. But where we are seeing a gap is around fuel cell. Fuel cell training is a bit on the lower side of preparedness, and I guess it's because it's sort of newish, but we have vehicles that are already using fuel cell, and our hope is the combination of hydrogen training and high voltage electrical training will go hand in hand, because when you have the fuel cell technology, you are converting hydrogen eventually to become an electrical kind output.
Thank you, Hammond. And I guess one of the questions for this group is, because as we realise, all the people in the room are working in this space, there are units in the PMA, there are units in the UEG. What might be required, and it doesn't have to be answered today, in the UEP moving forward, or is it purely going to be in the UEG and PMA? But I think there's probably some requirement in the UEP for in the generation side.
I think a couple of niche. There'll be some niche, you know, specific, particularly if you do use. I'm sure we should, but the power generation. But it's highly probable. So.
Yep. Is there anyone else around the country got working in this space or got any views? It was always going to be a pretty broad topic.
Brian spoke earlier about using hydrogen in the 80s, and then a couple have spoken about more recent experiences. What type of workers are we looking at that often shift into this area or are utilised in this space?
We've gone down the predominantly instrument electrical with some gas experience background, so maybe coming from an LNG background, and then putting the operations in, so they'll be an operator maintainer. We call it something different, but that's pretty much what it is. The challenge going forward is we'll have a multiple site with a small workforce. So when you go to CQU, for example, or TAFE Queensland, we say, look, we've got a grand number of 3 people that we want to do this and get some dates together. And fortunately, I think Fortescue's another one, and Rio and a few are doing their own thing. So they're joining in to make a good group of making it doable for the RTO, I suppose. And we get cross communication going, which has been positive to learn from each other, I think. And there's committees forming and that. So I think that's another challenge because we're all working in a pocket of smaller numbers. But the outcome of that is, I suppose, our technicians are going to be multi-site. So we may get down the path where statewide you might have a pool, not of 3 people on one site, but they might have a dozen, and they have to be competent at multiple sites. Similar equipment, but multiple sites.
Thanks for that. Brian, I can see your lips moving. I wasn't sure if you were going to make a comment or not. Yeah.
I'm talking to myself. It's just how I frame it. Look, hydrogen is a gas. We all know. We don't have to go into details. When we recruited for the LNG industry with Conoco for the Australia Pacific, we target process plant operators in general. And obviously the electrical side, instrumentation is quite important, but it really is about moving a molecule. So it's a good way to think of things. Are we moving an electron or moving a molecule? Hydrogen is a molecule. Okay, yes, there are electrons involved. So then you can sort of go, what are the skill sets associated with that? But you don't have to have, some of the people we did employ police officers, and there was so what's important is a very rigorous requirement, obviously the regulation side of things, but also what sort of skills do the person bring, and having a testing regime to understand, well, are they maths and science? Do they understand, if I do this here, what's going to happen down here? So, and the problem solving. So, but in a nutshell, process operations really, it's very similar in the hydrogen industry to moving any fluid. That makes sense. Because it's valving, piping, vessels, pumps or compressors. It depends if it's a liquid or a gas, and those principles never change. They're just a little bit depending on the characteristics of the fluid, of the molecule.
But you're not saying that it's a post-trade type training. It could be, yeah.
Well, it's initial. It doesn't have to be a trade, but I think initially it's very good to have someone with a trade or similar experiences. And then once you get a critical mass of people, and we're talking a big thing, you can bring in people through a traineeship. I'm the product of a traineeship in the State Electricity Commission of Victoria. And once you've got good mentors and good systems and process and competency systems, you can bring people off the street. Like Shell put on a travel agent, very young travel agent, and now she is one of the best operators there. So under the right conditions, having someone that without a trade, it's okay. I certainly wouldn't want to have most of the workforce initially like that. But they've got some of their trainees in Gladstone from when I was there. Now they're on the panel and becoming shift supervisors, and it's a really, really good system. I'm happy to talk to Rob about that, what was developed up there. But or anyone, it's a real passion.
Thanks, Brian. Cool. We might move along if you're happy, Adam. I think it's been a really good discussion. It was always it's a bit of a niche topic when we get into hydrogen, but it's certainly really like to thank Robert and Andrew. Robert for this topic and Andrew for his input on the wind. I sort of put them on the spot in the last couple of weeks and said, could you come along and add some SME to the conversation? So thanks heaps, guys, and thanks Adam and Joe for facilitating our technical discussions as well.
Thanks. Personally, that was really interesting from my perspective. You know, hydrogen to me is, one of the unknowns almost in my little brain, but we hear the term, we're developing micro skills, and usually when we talk hydrogen in our organisation, I defer to somebody else. So it's really interesting to try and understand more of it. But I think Robert brought up a good point around, demand and, where we see that in a lot of niche areas, I guess you'd call them, where you get 3 people want to be trained and, is it a viable, how do we get a training cohort together? Hammond mentioned that earlier with the renewable training, I think it was, so there are challenges that won't go away that we need to are worth considering. And then also around what delivery model is required when you're developing this training, is connected delivery online okay or not? I think there are also, this sort of space, it'd be good to consider that as well, because obviously that's attractive when we've got small cohorts around the country can come together in that sort of forum, but then it might be a risk associated with the actual operations and proving that you can use the equipment and being assessed, etc. So thanks very much for that input.
Thanks, Adam. So just looking at future agenda items for the UEP group, and look, this is a really good group. I think we've got a really good mix of industry, RTOs, in the employee side with the unions. So I think we've had the last tag and this one, there's been some really good discussions. Today we had one sort of technical point that we're going to progress with, but some general future thinking sort of discussions, which are really good. So just for future agenda items, I'm happy if anyone's got any that I want to suggest today, but also moving forward, if you go on our website and where you can leave feedback, slip them in there, and they always come through to myself and Phil, depending on the area, or both of us see them. And that way we can plan for future tags with those. And I'll just go on to any other general questions if anyone's got anything that's come up from today, or I'll take silences that everyone's happy. We might get back half an hour of our days, and I'm probably going to get to the airport on time. Sarah?
Yeah, hey Brett, sorry for that. I was just wondering, with the feedback process, given that we've given a lot of feedback here, do you guys record that somewhere apart from the actual video recording? I noticed on the reports it didn't have a lot of detail. There was lots of graphs and pie charts and things like that, but the actual details of the technical discussion, like minutes. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I just felt like it.
So Lucy Ann, probably Peter.
Sort of thing.
Yeah. So Lucy Ann, probably Peter, diligently writing down notes, and those are the full reports I didn't mention before are available on the website. Today what I put up was a very brief description of them, so that there are comments included in those, and we certainly like around that the action item, we've certainly record those points, because when we move forward through that TPOF process, all that stuff recorded and who said, what organisation they come from, and that is what Julie's looking for evidence around making any changes. So yeah, we certainly do.
Yeah, I was just it was just that last time after attending the 7 tags, it was a sort of 14-page submission that the ETU put into that process, which was rather time consuming after attending 7 different tag meetings. So I'm wondering if there's a different way for people who do attend all the TAG meetings rather than having to sort of give up 14 hours of time and then do additional sort of whole day's work putting together what we've already actually said. It seems like we're doubling up. That was my.
Yeah, look, so if you have said it, it definitely will be recorded and taken into account. Yeah, we still encourage people to do the RFAs, but understand when you go on all 7, that becomes problematic. This time there will actually, is this correct, Pete? We're doing RFAs in 2?
There'll be 2 because there's a bit of a break between. We've got, I think, a 3 or 4 week gap between the first tag and the last tag this time. So there will be 2 separate ones issued. One for these, the first 3, which is UEE, ELV, Specialist, and the UEP, which have this is the last of those 3. So that RFA link should come out the next day or so. And then the next, the final 4 are sort of clustered together as well. So after those ones, we'll send it out as well. But I guess just to point out as well, definitely the qualitative insights that we gain from this discussion, absolutely all recorded down with who'd said what and all of those sort of things. And to the best of our ability and the speed of our fingers, we try to record exactly verbatim what people have said. But I think that the thing about the RFA as well is that it allows us to get some quantitative insights as well, which can be really helpful. So yeah, absolutely understand it's quite a big time impost, and happy to work with you on ways to reduce that as much as possible. But it's quite hard for us in any other sort of medium to get that quantitative insight into, you know, how the volume of people are thinking and to identify some of those outliers and some of those risks and things like that might not have been sort of brought up through the more discussional and conversational side of things. So so yeah, it does help us get that other lens to it.
Yeah, and that captures the invisible people as well, the ones that don't come to the meetings and just do the written.
They do have to, we do sort of stipulate they have to attend a meeting to be able to fill out the RFA. So we don't want people sharing the RFA link around, and we do double check that. But yeah, we do attribute all of the comments behind the scenes. We know exactly who said what. That's all documented and logged. Yeah.
Yeah, it's only attendees that we would. Hammond?
Yeah, thank you. I hope this is not going to take everyone too far away from the business we were discussing so far. But my interest is around the electrical legislation, the act we are using, 1991, and the AS 3000 standards. I believe they are helping and shaping the training we are providing today. However, there are some areas where I feel within those standards and within the legislation, there is a gray area, or it is now becoming a gray area because of the entry of electric vehicle and other technologies that are using high voltage. While the standard doesn't, I still believe that the standard and the legislation here might not retain their validity in the in areas of distinguishing electrical work on vehicles. Is there any conversation going out there on the renewal of both the standard and maybe changing the act or working with the act to reform or to do some work in making them align with what we are seeing with the current technologies?
As far as the regulatory act is probably out of our remit, we can certainly provide a PSO point of view on that, Hammond. Sarah, are you still online? Because you've been doing some stuff with the other JSCs around the EVs. So you might be able to provide Hammond with a bit more on that one.
Yeah, sorry, my hand was still up because I forgot to put it down. But I think Hammond, with your legislation, made it's different in each state and territory. So you need to discuss it with whichever jurisdiction you're in. Certainly, I'm happy to have a conversation with you about the legislation in your state if you wanted to, and connect you up with the relevant EPU people in that state, wherever you are as well, to have a yarn about how that functions there and how you might want to move forward with whatever your problem is.
Yeah, that would be great if I can get in touch with you, Sarah, and we can discuss what's happening in that space.
Yep. Do you want to just pop your email in the chat?
Absolutely.
Hammond, and
sorry,
Sarah can follow up with you.
With my phone again. My email I'm happy for that to be shared, Brett, obviously, and can help you connect you up to someone to talk to. But as you know, the legislations differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and we tend to know some of them better, the ones in the jurisdictions where we're operating and working. But certainly the ETU has conversations live across all of those jurisdictions at all the time.
Yeah, and as we all know, every state is slightly different.
The NT's about to come up from 1978 to modern, so a little bit more modern anyway. Didn't quite get everything.
I better set my calendar forward. So the ways to contribute, obviously you're at this tag, so you know about that. We've talked about the requests for advice. It'd be really great when they come out in the next couple of days if you could put some information in there. You know, you don't have to do it straight away. Have a think about what you want to say. Through our website, there is where you just leave feedback, and that if it's a technical thing, always comes through to Phil and myself. And we'll follow up with you on that. You can also book a one-on-one session with either myself or Phil, depending on the package, and that's done through the website too. And you subscribe to our newsletter, contact your local ITAB, which is in New South Wales, Tony, and these recordings are also available online. So just again, really like to thank Joe and Adam for their input as champions. It's just a totally voluntary role, and they're both very busy people, I'm sure you're aware. So really appreciate them, and also appreciate the guys who come along today, Robert and Andrew, to provide us a bit of subject matter expertise in some areas that some of us probably aren't overly familiar with. I think there's a really good group discussion around that, the more open stuff, and we've got that point of action to go with the UEP ops units to move forward with them, because clearly there's support that something needs to be done in that space. But so thanks all. I'll give you back 20 minutes of your day, and hope to see you all soon.
Thanks, Brett. See you, everyone.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Brett.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
See you later.
Bye.